31 transfers, and everyone leads somewhere.
Then we follow the money.
And your husband?
He never checks.
Then explain this account. Was it disclosed?
David Garcia was 41, a financial compliance analyst in Charlotte, North Carolina. Most people saw him as a quiet man who simply followed his wife's lead. They believed Mia Garcia was the ambitious one, while David merely paid the bills and stayed out of the spotlight. He packed his own lunch every morning, drove a 12-year-old Ford F-150, and repaired things around the house instead of replacing them. What they didn't know was that David had spent months preparing one silent experiment that would expose the truth about his marriage. On the first Monday of April, his phone buzzed with an unpaid invoice, and for the first time in 15 years, his thumb hovered over the screen. Then slowly pressed, dismiss. If you're watching from somewhere in the world today, leave a comment telling me your country and your local time. I always enjoy seeing where these stories are reaching. And if you enjoy slow burn stories where patience, evidence, and quiet determination reveal the truth, take a second to subscribe. Tomorrow's story proves that sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one who already knows how everything will end. David Garcia had never imagined that money would become the quiet language of his marriage. When he met Mia Reynolds 14 years earlier, she wasn't interested in expensive handbags or luxury brunches. She was a waitress at a family-owned restaurant outside Charlotte, attending evening business classes at Central Piedmont Community College. David was already working as a junior compliance analyst at Carolina First Financial Group, wearing inexpensive suits that always seemed one season out of style. Their first conversations weren't about dreams. They were about responsibility. Mia admired the fact that David never complained. David admired the fact that Mia worked double shifts without asking anyone for help. Back then, they looked like two people building the same future. They married 2 years later in a small church outside Matthews, North Carolina. Fewer than 60 guests attended. David's mother, Linda Garcia, cooked half the reception meal herself to save money. Kevin Garcia, David's younger brother, joked that the homemade barbecue tasted better than anything a caterer could provide. Nobody cared that the decorations were simple. Everyone believed they were witnessing a marriage that would last. For several years, that belief appeared to be true. David received steady promotions at work. His salary increased almost every year. Instead of upgrading his lifestyle, he quietly increased their savings account. He refinanced their mortgage when interest rates dropped. He contributed the maximum amount to his retirement plan. He built an emergency fund large enough to cover nearly 8 months of living expenses. He never mentioned any of it. Numbers gave him peace. Recognition never mattered. Mia's ambitions grew as well. She dreamed of opening a boutique that sold locally designed women's clothing instead of mass-produced fashion. David believed in her without hesitation. When Magnolia Avenue Boutique opened in Charlotte's South End district, he spent nearly every weekend assembling shelves, painting walls, installing lights, and carrying inventory boxes. Friends complimented Mia's determination. Few noticed David unloading deliveries before sunrise. During the boutique's first year, profits were inconsistent. David paid the rent whenever sales fell short. He called it temporary support. Mia promised things would improve. Sometimes they did, often they didn't. As the years passed, David's paycheck slowly became the foundation beneath everything. The mortgage payment, both vehicle loans, property taxes, homeowners insurance, electricity, water, internet, cell phone plans, health insurance, vacation expenses, holiday shopping, unexpected repairs, even Magnolia Avenue Boutique's seasonal inventory orders. Whenever another expense appeared, Mia smiled and said the same sentence. "It'll be easier if you just handle it." David rarely argued, not because he agreed, because he believed marriage wasn't a competition over who paid more. He assumed seasons changed. One partner carried more for a while. Later, the balance returned. That was what partnership meant. At least, that was what he believed. Around that same time, Mia's social media presence began attracting attention. She posted photographs from rooftop restaurants overlooking uptown Charlotte, designer coffee shops, weekend wine tastings, fashion networking events. Every picture looked effortless. Every caption celebrated independence. Rachel Morgan, Maya's closest friend since college, often commented first, "You inspire me. So proud of you. Boss women do it better." David occasionally appeared in the background of those photos, usually carrying shopping bags, holding jackets, loading boxes into the truck. People joked about him online. David is the perfect Instagram husband. He always looks like security. He never smiles. David never responded. He barely used social media. His satisfaction came from watching numbers grow inside retirement accounts instead of collecting likes. Meanwhile, Magnolia Avenue Boutique continued struggling. Each quarter ended almost exactly the same. Sales were respectable. Expenses were enormous. Whenever suppliers requested payment, David transferred money. Whenever new furniture was needed, David paid. Whenever seasonal collections failed to sell, David absorbed the loss. Mia always promised the next season would finally change everything. David believed her, until promises slowly became expectations. The changes were almost invisible. Mia stopped asking before making purchases. Furniture deliveries simply arrived. Luxury handbags appeared in the bedroom closet. Spa memberships renewed automatically. Weekend trips became business networking. David noticed. He simply chose silence over confrontation. He hated arguments. Growing up, he'd watched his parents fight over overdue bills until their voices echoed through the house. His father always reacted first. His mother always cried last. David promised himself his own marriage would never sound like that. So instead of speaking, he calculated. Instead of accusing, he observed. One Friday evening, he returned home carrying groceries. The kitchen island was covered with shopping bags from luxury stores. Mia walked downstairs wearing a new designer coat. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning once. "It looks nice." "It was on sale." David nodded. Later that evening, while putting receipts into the household filing cabinet, he quietly noticed the charge. The coat had cost nearly $1,800. Not discounted, not on sale. Paid with a credit card he didn't recognize. He paused for several seconds. Then he closed the folder. He said nothing. Another week passed. Another unexplained purchase. Another explanation. Another promise. One Sunday afternoon, Kevin stopped by to watch a Panthers game. As David grilled burgers in the backyard, Kevin glanced toward the driveway. "When did Mia get that new Mercedes?" David looked up. "I thought she traded the SUV." Kevin frowned. "That's not a trade, that's brand new." David stared at the polished black vehicle sitting under the afternoon sun. He honestly hadn't noticed. Not because he didn't care, because he had been working late every night for nearly 3 weeks. "I'll ask her," David replied. Kevin studied his brother for a long moment. "You always say that." David smiled faintly. "It'll work itself out." Kevin didn't answer. He simply turned back toward the grill. Linda Garcia noticed something different as well. During Sunday dinner a month later, she watched Mia casually mention another shopping trip. Linda waited until Mia stepped into the kitchen. She lowered her voice. "David." "Yeah." "Are you happy?" The question lingered longer than he expected. "I think so." Linda looked directly into his eyes. "You answered too slowly." David forced a smile. "I'm just tired." His mother nodded, but she wasn't convinced. Neither was David. That night after Mia had fallen asleep, David sat alone in the home office. The room was almost silent except for the faint hum of his desktop computer. He opened Microsoft Excel, created a new workbook, named it Household Financial Review, then another worksheet, monthly expenses, then another, business support, then another, personal purchases. For the next 4 hours, he entered every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every insurance premium, every transfer, every receipt, every credit card statement he legally had access to. No accusations, no conclusions. Only dates, amounts, account numbers, categories. By 2:30 in the morning, one thing had become painfully clear. For years, David hadn't been supporting half of their life. He had been supporting almost all of it. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the glowing spreadsheet. The numbers weren't emotional. They didn't exaggerate. They didn't lie. For the first time, David wondered whether the problem wasn't how much he was paying. It was how invisible his contributions had become. As he closed the laptop, an unexpected email notification appeared from his bank. The subject line was short. Automatic payment failed. David stared at the screen. He didn't know it yet. But that single notification would become the first loose thread in a marriage that was about to unravel completely. David barely slept that night. The failed payment notification stayed on his mind long after he shut down the computer. It wasn't the amount that bothered him. The invoice was only a few $100s for one of Magnolia Avenue Boutique's monthly software subscriptions. He could have paid it in less than 30 seconds. For years, that was exactly what he would have done. Open the banking app, transfer the money, delete the notification, move on. This time, he did none of those things. Instead, he drove to work before sunrise, just as he always had. The April air in Charlotte still carried the coolness of early spring. His 12-year-old Ford F-150 rumbled through nearly empty streets, while office towers slowly reflected the first orange light of morning. Nothing about his routine changed. That was intentional. David understood something many people never learned. Real observations only happen when everything else remains normal. If he suddenly became angry, if he announced a financial strike, if he threatened divorce, every reaction afterward could be blamed on the argument itself. He didn't want reactions to him. He wanted reactions to reality. At 8:15 that morning, he walked into Carolina First Financial Group carrying the same worn leather briefcase he had owned for nearly a decade. His coworkers greeted him exactly as they always did. "Morning, David." "Morning." His supervisor nodded from across the compliance department. Another ordinary day. By lunchtime, David had already reviewed 2 anti-money laundering reports, approved 1 internal audit, and finished a regulatory compliance memo due the following week. Numbers calmed him. Unlike people, numbers followed rules. At precisely 5:30 that afternoon, David drove across town to meet Sarah Whitmore. Her office occupied the 6th floor of an older brick building overlooking Tryon Street. The brass plaque outside read, "Whitmore Family Law." Sarah greeted him with a firm handshake. She was in her early 50s, composed, direct, and known throughout Mecklenburg County for handling complicated divorce cases without unnecessary courtroom drama. She studied David for a moment before speaking. "You don't look angry." "I'm tired." "That's usually better." They sat inside a conference room overlooking uptown Charlotte. David placed a thick folder on the table. Bank statements, mortgage documents, tax returns, business transfers, insurance policies. Sarah opened the folder slowly. "You've organized everything." "I work in compliance." "I can tell." For nearly an hour, Sarah asked questions. "Who paid the mortgage?" "I do." "Vehicles?" "I do." "Utilities?" "Me." "Insurance?" "Me." "Business expenses?" "Mostly me." "Household groceries?" "Usually me." "Vacation costs?" "Me." She stopped writing. "What exactly does your wife contribute financially?" David thought carefully before answering. "Some income from the boutique." "How much actually stays in your household?" He hesitated. "I honestly don't know anymore." Sarah closed her notebook. "David, before we discuss divorce, I need to ask one important question." He waited. "What are you trying to prove?" The room became quiet. Finally, David answered, "I don't want revenge." Sarah nodded slightly. I don't even want to catch her doing something. Another pause. I just want to know whether this marriage still exists if I stop carrying all of it. Sarah leaned back. That's a very different question. She remained silent for several seconds before offering her advice. If you truly want the answer, don't manufacture it. David frowned slightly. I don't understand. Don't trap her. I wasn't planning to. Don't provoke her. I won't. Don't make speeches. I hate speeches. Sarah smiled faintly. I believe you. She slid a legal pad toward him. If you do this, follow 4 rules. She wrote each one carefully. Rule 1. Continue paying every financial obligation that is legally yours. Mortgage, property taxes, insurance, anything connected directly to your legal responsibility. Rule 2. Stop paying expenses that belong exclusively to Mia unless you've already agreed to them contractually. Personal shopping, luxury spending, boutique operating expenses, private subscriptions. Rule 3. Keep your behavior exactly the same. Go to work, come home, be polite. Don't announce an experiment. Don't threaten separation. Rule 4. Document everything. Every conversation, every payment request, every financial consequence. Facts matter. Feelings don't win courtrooms. Evidence does. David read the page twice. How long? Sarah answered immediately. 30 days. Why 30? Long enough for financial patterns to emerge. She folded her hands. People can fake almost anything for 3 days. She smiled slightly. 30 days is much harder. David left her office carrying more clarity than he had felt in years. On the drive home, he stopped at a local bank branch. Not to hide money. Not to move assets illegally. Simply to separate his future budgeting. The banker helped him establish a new checking account for his direct payroll deposits while maintaining full transparency regarding joint obligations. Every transfer was documented. Every account remained lawful. Every action could later be explained with paperwork. Exactly the way David preferred. That evening, Mia barely looked up from her phone as he walked into the kitchen. Hey. Hi. Did you pick up milk? It's in the refrigerator. Thanks. Nothing unusual. David cooked grilled chicken while Mia answered messages between scrolling through social media. She mentioned an upcoming boutique promotion, a networking dinner, a fashion vendor arriving next week. David listened, asked normal questions, offered normal answers. Nothing about him suggested anything had changed. Only one thing actually had. When Magnolia Avenue Boutique's automatic software invoice attempted to process again that evening, David's account wasn't connected anymore. The payment failed. Again. At 9:12 p.m., Mia glanced at her phone. Huh. David continued washing dishes. What? My inventory software didn't renew. Oh, it must be the bank. Probably. She shrugged. I'll call them tomorrow. David simply nodded. No argument, no lecture, no accusation. Exactly as Sarah instructed. The next morning, Mia called customer service while drinking coffee. David could hear only fragments from the kitchen. No, the card worked last month. That's impossible. Try it again. Let me speak to someone else. 20 minutes later, she ended the call with visible frustration. They said the payment was declined. David looked up from his breakfast. That's frustrating. I know. She expected another response. Perhaps an offer. Perhaps a transfer. Instead, David took another bite of toast. Nothing more. Throughout the day, he logged the event inside his spreadsheet. April 2nd. Boutique software renewal declined. Customer blamed bank. No request made to David. Observation only. That evening, another notification appeared. A premium streaming service had attempted renewal using the same account previously linked to David. It failed automatically. 10 minutes later, Mia walked into the living room holding the television remote. "Why isn't the streaming app working?" David checked the screen casually. It says, "Payment failed." "Seriously?" She laughed lightly. "This week is ridiculous." David nodded. "Looks like it." Again she waited. Again he remained silent. She eventually opened another entertainment app instead. No confrontation, not yet. Before going to bed, David updated his spreadsheet. 2 failed payments, 2 calm reactions, 0 accusations. He wasn't measuring money anymore. He was measuring expectations. As he closed the laptop, his cell phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello? Mr. Garcia?" "Yes. This is Amanda from Piedmont Business Credit. We're calling regarding an overdue vendor balance for Magnolia Avenue Boutique. We were told you're the person responsible for payment." David's expression remained calm. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't a subscription. This was a business creditor who already assumed he would solve someone else's financial problem, and that assumption told him far more than the unpaid invoice ever could. David answered the phone with the same calm voice he used during compliance meetings. "This is David Garcia." "Mr. Garcia, thank you for taking my call," the woman said. "I'm Amanda from Piedmont Business Credit. We have an outstanding balance of $3,486 from Magnolia Avenue Boutique. Your name was listed as the financial contact." David looked at the spreadsheet still open on his laptop. "My name was listed?" "Yes, sir." "Am I personally responsible for the account?" There was a brief pause while Amanda checked her records. "No, sir. The business owner is Mia Garcia." "Then why was I called?" "Your number was listed as the emergency payment contact." David thanked her politely. "If I'm not legally responsible for the account, you'll need to discuss it with the owner." "Of course. Thank you for your time." The call ended. David didn't feel angry. He felt something else, invisible. Not because creditors called him, because everyone assumed he would quietly solve every financial problem without being asked. He added another line to his spreadsheet. April 3rd. Business creditor contacted David despite no legal responsibility. Observation. No payment made. No discussion initiated. He saved the file. The experiment was only 3 days old. Already patterns were emerging. The following afternoon, Mia drove to Magnolia Avenue Boutique, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. The boutique occupied a narrow storefront surrounded by coffee shops and small restaurants. Through the large display windows, spring dresses hung neatly beneath warm lighting. Customers saw elegance. David knew the balance sheets. Business looked beautiful. Profit rarely followed. Around 11 o'clock, Brandon Miller walked over from his neighboring men's clothing store, carrying a cup of coffee. "Morning," Mia smiled. "Hey, Brandon. I saw the delivery truck leave." "It did." "They didn't unload anything." Mia hesitated. "Oh, inventory got delayed." Brandon nodded. "Supply issues again." "Something like that." She changed the subject immediately. "Want coffee?" "Already have one." Brandon wasn't suspicious. Not yet. He simply returned to his own store. Inside the boutique, Mia immediately called one of her clothing suppliers. "I already told you the payment is processing." She listened. "No, there isn't a problem." Another pause. "The bank is fixing it." She forced a laugh. "It'll clear today." After hanging up, she stared silently at the counter. Across town, David sat through an internal audit meeting. His phone vibrated once, then twice, then 3 times. He didn't answer. When the meeting ended, he checked the notifications. "Missed call. Mia, missed call. Mia, text message. Call me. Nothing else. No explanation, no emergency." David waited until lunch before returning the call. "Everything okay?" "Did you change something with the accounts?" "What do you mean?" My supplier says payments aren't going through. David remained quiet for a second. I'm not sure. You didn't move money? I reorganized some personal banking. Well, something isn't working. I hope the bank sorts it out. She sounded confused. Not angry, not yet. I guess I'll keep calling them. I hope they can help. David ended the conversation. Another entry appeared inside his spreadsheet. Mia noticed payment issues. No direct request for money. No accusation. Blamed bank. He closed the document. His objective wasn't proving guilt, it was documenting behavior. That evening, David stopped at a grocery store on his way home. He bought chicken, rice, fresh vegetables, coffee, milk, eggs. Exactly what they normally needed. Nothing extravagant. When he arrived home, Mia stood in the kitchen holding her phone. The gym charged my membership again. David unpacked groceries. Okay. It declined. He looked up briefly. That's annoying. She waited. Nothing. You don't think that's weird? Maybe call the billing department. She frowned. I already did. What did they say? The card didn't go through? David nodded. I've had cards expire before. This one's not expired. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Again, no offer, no transfer, no rescue. For the first time in years, Mia looked genuinely puzzled. She wasn't used to solving financial problems herself. Not because she couldn't, because she had almost never needed to. After dinner, she opened her laptop and began checking online banking. David watched television quietly without saying a word. Every few minutes, she sighed. This makes no sense. Silence. I swear everything was working last month. Silence. I hate dealing with banks. David simply nodded once. The room felt strangely unfamiliar, not because anyone was shouting, because nobody was filling the silence anymore. Later that night, Rachel Morgan called. David could hear Mia talking upstairs. It's ridiculous. Everything keeps declining. Rachel said something that made Mia laugh. No, David doesn't know what's going on. Another pause. I mean, he'll probably fix it. David looked away from the television. That sentence stayed with him. He'll probably fix it, not. We'll fix it, not. I'll figure it out. He'll fix it. After Mia went to bed, David opened the spreadsheet again. He highlighted those words inside his notes. Expectation of automatic financial rescue continues. No request. Assumption only. The next morning brought another surprise. David received an email from Magnolia Avenue Boutique's commercial internet provider. Past due notice. He stared at the message. The account wasn't even in his name. Yet his email address had been entered as the secondary billing contact years earlier. He hadn't remembered doing that, probably because Mia had asked him during one busy afternoon while opening the store. It'll just make things easier. He remembered those words now. Everything had always been easier. For everyone. Except him. Instead of paying the balance, David archived the email. At noon, Mia called again. This internet company is driving me crazy. What happened? They're threatening suspension. I'm sorry. Can you look at the account? David answered carefully. It's your business account. I know. Another pause. I just thought maybe you'd know what's wrong. I don't have access anymore. You don't know. Silence filled the call. Okay. She ended the conversation first. That afternoon, Brandon visited the boutique again. No shipment today either. Mia forced another smile. Vendor delays? Brandon looked unconvinced. Funny. What? They delivered to everyone else. She laughed too quickly. I switched suppliers. You did? Yeah. Brandon nodded politely, but after leaving the store, he glanced once more through the display window. Something didn't fit. He couldn't explain why. Business owners recognized certain patterns: missed deliveries, repeated excuses, delayed invoices. Those things rarely happened without a reason. That evening, David returned home to find Mia sitting at the dining table surrounded by unopened mail. Credit card statements, utility reminders, boutique invoices. She quickly gathered them into a pile as he walked in. "Long day?" David asked. "The worst." "I'm sorry." She rubbed her forehead. "Everything is happening at once." He placed groceries on the counter. "What kind of things?" She almost answered. Almost. Instead, she smiled weakly. "Just work." David nodded. He didn't press further. Questions could influence answers. Silence often revealed more. After Mia went upstairs, David noticed one envelope still lying beneath the chair. He didn't open it. He simply read the return address printed outside. Charlotte Premium Fitness Club, final membership notice. He quietly placed it back, exactly where it had been. Another observation, nothing more. The experiment had reached only its 4th day. Already subscriptions had stopped. Vendors were calling. Business services were failing. Routine expenses were becoming emergencies. Yet Mia still hadn't asked one question. How can we solve this together? Everything remained centered on one expectation, that David would somehow make every problem disappear. The following morning, as David prepared to leave for work, Mia stood beside the front door, with crossed arms. This time there was no smile, no small talk, only one question. "David." He turned calmly. "We need to talk about the money." David stopped with one hand on the front door. Mia stood in the hallway wearing business clothes that looked perfectly pressed, but the confidence she usually carried had begun to fade. Her shoulders were stiff. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. For the first time in years, she looked less like someone managing a successful business and more like someone trying to hold several collapsing walls together. "We need to talk about the money," she repeated. David turned toward her. "Okay?" She seemed surprised by how quickly he agreed. "I've been having problems with payments." "I heard. The bank keeps declining things." He nodded. "That's frustrating." She waited. Nothing else came. Finally, she asked, "Did you change something?" David answered carefully. "I reorganized some of my personal banking." "What does that mean?" "It means my paycheck goes into a different account now." Her expression tightened. "Why?" "I wanted a clearer household budget." She searched his face for several seconds. "Without telling me, I didn't think changing where my salary is deposited required a meeting." Silence settled between them. David wasn't trying to be clever. He was simply answering exactly what she asked. Mia folded her arms. "The boutique has bills due." "I know. The software." "I heard." "The internet?" "I know." "The inventory supplier?" David nodded once. "I received a call from one of them." Her eyes widened. "They called you?" "They did." "What did you tell them?" "The truth." "What truth?" "That I wasn't responsible for the account." Mia looked away. For a brief moment, David noticed something unfamiliar. Not guilt, calculation. She seemed to be deciding which version of the story would work best. Finally, she sighed. "I've just been overwhelmed." "I understand." "I thought you'd help." David met her eyes calmly. "You never asked." Those 3 words lingered in the hallway. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. David picked up his briefcase. "I have to get to work." Before she could answer, he stepped outside. He drove away without looking back. Inside his truck, he dictated a voice memo. April 5th. First direct conversation regarding payment problems. Subject acknowledged financial difficulties. No request for partnership. Expectation remained that I would assume responsibility. Conversation remained calm. No accusations. He saved the recording. Every observation mattered. At Magnolia Avenue Boutique, the morning began badly. A delivery truck stopped outside the storefront, but remained parked only a few minutes. The driver stepped inside carrying a clipboard. Mia smiled automatically. "Morning." "I'm sorry, ma'am." "For what?" "We have instructions to hold this shipment until the outstanding balance is resolved." "It should already be processing." The driver shook his head politely. "I can only follow dispatch instructions." He walked back outside. The truck pulled away. Through the front window, Brandon Miller watched everything from across the sidewalk. Later that afternoon, he carried over another coffee. "You okay?" "Just supply issues." "You've had a lot of supply issues lately." She forced a laugh. "Retail is unpredictable." Brandon nodded slowly. "I suppose." He didn't push further, but something about the conversation stayed with him. Retail owners usually talked openly about shipping delays. They rarely became uncomfortable discussing invoices. Meanwhile, David spent the afternoon meeting with Michael Reynolds. Michael had worked as a certified public accountant in Charlotte for over 25 years. His office walls were covered with framed accounting certifications instead of motivational posters. Everything about him suggested precision. David handed him 2 folders. "I need an objective opinion." Michael adjusted his glasses. "Personal?" "Financial." "For litigation?" "Possibly." Michael began reading. Bank statements, tax documents, household expenses, business transfers, credit card records. Nearly 40 minutes passed without conversation. Finally, Michael leaned back. "You've been paying much more than I expected." David didn't respond. Michael continued. "Much more." He pulled out a yellow legal pad. "I've listed everything that's immediately obvious." He circled several categories: mortgage, vehicles, insurance, utilities, business support, vacation expenses, emergency transfers. Then another category: unknown spending. "What's that?" David asked. Michael turned several pages. "There are recurring expenses that don't appear connected to household operations." "What kind?" "Luxury retail." "Restaurants." "Travel." "Large cash withdrawals." David frowned slightly. "Those are from our joint account." "Some are." "Others?" Michael tapped another statement. "Personal credit cards." David looked carefully. "I've never seen these accounts." "I suspected that." Michael slid another document across the desk. "They're registered solely under Mia." David remained quiet. "I requested only documents you're legally entitled to review because they affected shared financial activity." He paused. "This isn't unusual during divorce preparation." David spoke softly. "I'm not preparing for divorce." Michael looked at him. "Not yet." David didn't answer. Michael continued organizing papers. "There's something else." "What?" He opened another folder. "The boutique has been operating at a loss for almost 3 consecutive years." David blinked. 3? Closer to 34 months. But Mia always said business was improving. Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he rotated a spreadsheet toward David. Monthly revenue, monthly expenses, inventory purchases, operating costs. Every month ended almost the same way. Small losses, moderate losses, occasional larger losses, very few profitable periods. David studied the figures. They weren't opinions, they were mathematics. Michael folded his hands. "Without your transfers, this business likely would have closed over a year ago." David slowly exhaled. "I didn't realize." "No. I don't think you were supposed to." The words landed heavily. David wasn't shocked because money had disappeared. He was shocked because he had never once asked to see complete numbers. Trust had replaced verification. Now verification was replacing trust. Before leaving, Michael handed him another folder. I recommend documenting every future interaction. I'm already doing that. Good. And don't confront anyone until you understand the full picture. David nodded. I wasn't planning to. Driving home, he replayed the conversation several times. Not once had Michael used emotional language. He never called anyone dishonest. He simply described numbers. The numbers themselves were becoming impossible to ignore. That evening, Rachel Morgan invited Mia to dinner. The restaurant overlooked Romare Bearden Park, one of Mia's favorite places in Charlotte. Rachel noticed the change immediately. You look exhausted. I haven't slept. Business, Mia nodded. Everything's falling behind. What about David? He changed. How? He stopped. She hesitated. Rachel waited. Helping. Rachel frowned. What do you mean? He knows things are going wrong. And he just watches. Rachel stirred her iced tea thoughtfully. Did you ask him? Mia looked away. Not exactly. Rachel raised one eyebrow. So he doesn't actually know what you need. He should. Rachel didn't answer. The conversation shifted to other topics. But for the first time, Rachel quietly questioned something she had always assumed. Perhaps David wasn't refusing to help. Perhaps everyone had simply assumed helping was automatically his responsibility. Later that night, David updated his spreadsheet. Day 5. First direct discussion completed. CPA confirms boutique sustained long-term losses. Previously unknown personal credit accounts identified. Additional financial review required. He closed the laptop. Just as he reached for the light switch, his phone vibrated. A fraud alert from his bank. Unrecognized account activity detected. Location: Greenville, South Carolina. David stared at the screen. He hadn't been anywhere near Greenville. Neither had he authorized any transaction connected to that city. He immediately opened the banking application. The notification disappeared, but one unfamiliar account number remained visible on the linked financial profile. He had never seen it before, and somehow it was connected to his household. David arrived at Michael Reynolds' office the following afternoon carrying a thin folder instead of the thick binder from their previous meeting. Inside was a single printed page. The unfamiliar account number from the bank alert. Michael adjusted his glasses. Where did this come from? My bank flagged unusual activity. The transaction disappeared, but this account remained linked to our household profile. Michael studied the document for several moments. Did you authorize anything connected to it? No. Have you ever seen this account before? David shook his head. Never. Michael leaned back in his chair. Then we start with facts. He logged into the accounting software and began comparing the account number with the financial records David had legally collected from their joint household statements. Neither man spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Only the sound of computer keys interrupted the silence. Finally, Michael stopped typing. I found something. David looked up. The account isn't jointly owned. Whose is it? I can't determine ownership from these records. What can you determine? Michael rotated the monitor. Money has moved between this account and your joint household account several times. How many? 31 transfers over the last 22 months. David stared at the screen. The individual amounts weren't enormous. $400, $600, $900, sometimes $1,500. Separated, each transfer looked ordinary. Together, they represented more than $38,000. David remained silent. Michael continued. Most people would never notice. They're too small. Exactly. David looked carefully at the dates. Almost every transfer occurred within 2 days of his paycheck reaching the joint account. Not immediately, just close enough to blend into dozens of normal household transactions. Michael clicked another report. There's another pattern. What? Every transfer is followed by spending at businesses unrelated to household expenses. Designer clothing, luxury department stores, upscale restaurants, hotel reservations. David felt his stomach tighten. Not because of the money, because of the consistency. This wasn't impulsive spending. It looked planned. Michael printed several pages. I recommend organizing everything chronologically. David nodded. No assumptions. Exactly. We document patterns. Nothing else. David appreciated that approach. Evidence before conclusions. It matched the way he had built his entire career. Before leaving, Michael handed him a checklist. Verify every transaction. Confirm account ownership through legal discovery if necessary. Continue documenting daily events. Do not confront anyone prematurely. David folded the paper into his notebook. Outside, the afternoon traffic moved slowly through uptown Charlotte. He drove home without turning on the radio. His mind kept returning to the same question. If the money wasn't supporting the household, where had it actually gone? That evening, Mia appeared unusually cheerful. She greeted him with a smile. I made dinner. David noticed pasta already on the table. It had been months since she had cooked on a weekday. It smells good. I thought we could eat together. They sat quietly. For several minutes, the conversation stayed comfortably ordinary. Work, weather, Kevin's upcoming birthday, a baseball game on television. Then Mia cleared her throat. I've been thinking. David looked up. About what? Money. He waited. I know things have been stressful lately. They have. I've probably relied on you too much. David listened carefully. It was the closest she had come to acknowledging the imbalance. I appreciate you saying that. She smiled. So, could you help me just this once? There it was. Not a discussion about shared planning, not a proposal for a budget, a request for another rescue. My supplier needs payment. How much? About $3,500. David folded his hands. Is that a business expense? Yes. Then the business should pay it. Her smile disappeared. The business doesn't have enough cash. He answered calmly. I'm sorry to hear that. She stared at him. That's it. I don't own the boutique. We're married. We are. So you'll just let it fail. David chose every word carefully. I hope it succeeds. But you won't help. I've already helped for years. Silence filled the dining room. Neither of them raised their voice. Neither of them argued. The conversation simply stopped. Mia pushed her plate away. I'm not hungry. She walked upstairs. David remained seated. He wasn't celebrating. There was no satisfaction, only sadness. He remembered assembling shelves before the boutique opened, painting walls, installing lights, believing they were building something together. Somewhere along the way, partnership had quietly become obligation. Later that night, Kevin called. You busy? Not really. Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Sure. The following morning, they met at a small cafe near Freedom Park. Kevin immediately noticed David looked exhausted. You okay? I'm figuring some things out. Kevin nodded. You finally started asking questions. David smiled faintly. I guess I did. Kevin stirred his coffee. I never wanted to interfere. I know. But I always wondered why you carried everything. David looked outside. I thought that's what husbands were supposed to do. Kevin shook his head. Husbands support families. He paused. They don't become unlimited credit cards. David laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh he had experienced in weeks. Kevin leaned forward. Whatever you're doing now? Yeah. Stay patient. David nodded. I intend to. Back at Magnolia Avenue Boutique, the pressure continued building. Another supplier suspended future shipments. A cleaning company requested payment before providing service. The commercial internet provider issued a final warning. Brandon Miller watched customers enter the boutique only to find empty clothing racks where new seasonal inventory should have been displayed. Business no longer looked normal. Even casual shoppers noticed. Rachel Morgan stopped by that afternoon carrying iced coffee. "You've been hard to reach." "I've been busy." Rachel glanced around the nearly unchanged displays. "I thought you were launching a spring collection." "So did I." "What happened?" Mia hesitated. "Cash flow." Rachel frowned. "I thought business was doing great." "It usually is." The answer sounded less convincing than before. Rachel didn't argue. But for the first time, she began comparing Mia's public image with the quiet reality sitting directly in front of her. The difference was becoming difficult to ignore. That evening, David updated his spreadsheet. Day 6. 31 unexplained transfers identified. Business requested additional financial support. Support respectfully declined. No argument occurred. Outside observations indicate increasing operational strain at boutique. He saved the document. Just before shutting down the computer, another notification appeared in his email. Not from a bank, not from a creditor, from a downtown Charlotte hotel. It wasn't addressed to him. But somehow, the confirmation receipt had been copied to the shared household email address. David read the first line once, then again. Reservation confirmed for 2 guests. David didn't open the hotel confirmation email again. Instead, he forwarded it to Michael Reynolds with a single sentence. "Take a look at the dates." An hour later, Michael called. "I think you should come by." David left work early that afternoon. Michael already had several spreadsheets open across 2 monitors when David entered the office. Without saying a word, he pointed toward a timeline stretching across the screen. Blue lines marked David's payroll deposits. Green lines marked transfers from the joint account. Red circles highlighted hotel reservations. Michael folded his arms. "I wasn't looking for an affair." "Neither was I. I was looking for patterns." David stepped closer. Every unexplained transfer occurred within 48 hours of a hotel reservation. Every reservation was followed by unusually expensive restaurant charges. Every restaurant charge was followed by luxury retail purchases. None of those expenses matched the normal operation of Magnolia Avenue Boutique. Michael tapped the screen. "One coincidence doesn't mean much." He tapped again. 31 coincidences become a pattern. David remained silent. The numbers spoke clearly enough. Michael closed the spreadsheet. "Financial records can tell us where money goes." He looked directly at David. "They can't tell us who receives the benefit." "What do you recommend?" "A licensed investigator." David didn't answer immediately. He had spent his career believing documents solved every problem. Now he understood their limits. Paper trails explained transactions, not relationships. 2 days later, David met Daniel Foster. Daniel had spent nearly 20 years as a licensed private investigator in North Carolina after leaving the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. His office was simple. No dramatic photographs, no detective novels on the shelves, only filing cabinets and framed investigator licenses. Daniel listened quietly while David explained the situation. "I don't want anyone followed because I'm jealous." Daniel nodded. "I don't want assumptions." Another nod. "I want facts." Daniel leaned forward. "That's the only kind of work I do." David slid a folder across the desk. Inside were bank records, hotel confirmations, restaurant receipts, transfer dates, nothing else. Daniel looked through the documents carefully. "You've already done most of the work." "I'm not trying to prove anyone guilty." "I can see that." Daniel closed the folder. "If I accept this case, I investigate behavior, not feelings." David stood. "That's exactly what I need." The investigation began quietly. David never followed Mia. He never checked her phone. He never drove past the boutique hoping to catch something. Instead, he continued living exactly as he had before. He left for work before sunrise, reviewed compliance reports, packed homemade lunches, visited his mother on Sunday afternoons, shared coffee with Kevin once each week. If anyone watched David's life, nothing appeared different. That was intentional. Meanwhile, Daniel documented facts. Nothing more. Several days passed before the first report arrived. Mia had met the same man for lunch twice within 1 week. Both meetings lasted more than 2 hours. Neither occurred near Magnolia Avenue Boutique. The restaurants were among the most expensive in uptown Charlotte. David read the report once, then filed it. No conclusions. A second report arrived 3 days later. The same man, different restaurant, another long meeting, another luxury hotel nearby. Again, Daniel included only times, locations, photographs, no opinions. David appreciated that. At Magnolia Avenue, Boutique, pressure continued building. Empty sections appeared where new seasonal inventory should have been displayed. Regular customers asked when fresh collections would arrive. Mia smiled politely. Soon. The answer became familiar. Across the sidewalk, Brandon Miller noticed the changes. Retail businesses depended on movement, new displays, new merchandise, new deliveries. Magnolia Avenue Boutique had almost stopped moving altogether. One afternoon he walked inside, carrying 2 coffees. "You've been saying soon for weeks." Mia forced a smile. "My supplier is behind." Brandon glanced toward the nearly empty display shelves. "All of them." She didn't answer immediately. "I've had bad luck." Brandon nodded politely, but he left with more questions than answers. Rachel Morgan noticed something different as well. Mia's social media continued showing rooftop dinners, elegant dresses, and carefully staged photographs. Yet every time Rachel visited the boutique, business looked quieter. Inventory looked smaller. Employees looked worried. The pictures online no longer matched reality. Rachel didn't accuse her friend. She simply began paying closer attention. Late Friday afternoon, Daniel called. "I have something." David drove to Daniel's office after work. The investigator placed a sealed envelope on the desk. "I've identified the man." David looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "Who is he?" "Ethan Collins." "The real estate agent?" "The same one." Daniel opened another folder. "He specializes in luxury residential properties." "He isn't connected to the boutique?" "No." "He appears financially successful." Daniel nodded. "He also appears to have met your wife repeatedly over the past several weeks." David remained expressionless. Daniel spoke carefully. "I need to be clear about something." David listened. "Repeated meetings do not automatically prove an affair." "I understand." "They prove repeated meetings." "Nothing more." Daniel smiled faintly. "I wish more clients understood that." He pushed the envelope toward David. "Everything inside is legally obtained." David picked it up. It felt surprisingly light. Only a few photographs, nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just evidence. As he drove away, he stopped beside Freedom Park before heading home. The evening sun reflected across the lake. Families walked along quiet paths. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. David switched off the engine. For several minutes, he simply stared at the envelope resting on the passenger seat. He realized something unexpected. He wasn't afraid of discovering the truth. He was afraid the truth would confirm everything the numbers had already been trying to tell him. Finally, he reached for the envelope. His fingers paused on the seal. Then, with one slow breath, he began to open it. David opened the envelope inside his parked truck. The first photograph showed Mia leaving an upscale restaurant in uptown Charlotte beside Ethan Collins. They were walking close enough that their shoulders touched. In the second photograph, Ethan held the door of a black Range Rover, while Mia smiled at him. The third image was different. They stood beneath the covered entrance of the Grand Bohemian Hotel. Ethan's hand rested against the small of Mia's back. Mia looked up at him, with an expression David had not seen directed toward him in years. There was no confusion left. David set the photographs on the passenger seat. He did not tear them. He did not call Mia. He did not drive toward the hotel. He simply sat in the quiet truck and listened to the faint ticking of the cooling engine. The pain arrived slowly, not as rage, as recognition. For months he had believed the biggest problem in his marriage was money. Now he understood that the money had only been the path leading toward something deeper. The missing funds had purchased dinners, hotels, gifts, time, a second life. David gathered the photographs and placed them back inside the envelope. Then he called Sarah Whitmore. "I have confirmation." Sarah's voice remained calm. "Confirmation of what?" "Repeated private meetings, hotel visits, physical contact." "Do you have legally obtained documentation, Paul?" "Daniel Foster provided it." "Good. Do not confront her." "I wasn't planning to." "Bring everything to my office tomorrow." The next morning, David arrived before Sarah's first appointment. Daniel joined them 20 minutes later carrying a file containing dates, locations, receipts, and sworn notes from his surveillance. Sarah reviewed each page. She never reacted to the photographs. She treated them like any other evidence. That helped David remain steady. After nearly an hour, she closed the file. "This supports marital misconduct." David looked toward the window. "It also supports financial dissipation." "What does that mean?" "It means marital funds may have been spent for purposes unrelated to the marriage." Daniel slid a second document across the table. "I identified the man." Sarah read the name. "Ethan Collins." Daniel nodded. "Luxury real estate agent, works primarily with high net worth clients in Charlotte and Lake Norman." David had seen Ethan's face on billboards. Tailored suits, bright smile. A slogan beneath his name promised discreet service and exceptional results. Sarah asked, "Does he know Mia is married?" Daniel answered carefully, "I can't prove what he knows." David appreciated the distinction. Facts remained facts. Assumptions remained useless. Later that afternoon, Michael Reynolds joined the review remotely. He matched Daniel's surveillance dates with the unexplained financial transfers. A dinner at the Capitol Grill followed an $800 transfer. A hotel stay at the Grand Bohemian followed $1,200. A weekend in Greenville matched the fraud alert David had received. The pattern extended back almost 18 months. Michael shared another screen. "There's more." David leaned forward. Several transfers had gone from Mia's hidden account to businesses connected with Ethan Collins: luxury auto detailing, a private event company, a high-end men's clothing store. One payment of $2,600 had gone to a jeweler in South Park Mall. David looked down at his wedding ring. He said nothing. Michael continued, "These aren't business expenses." Sarah asked, "Can you verify the source of the money?" "Most of it originated from transfers out of the joint account." The room became silent. David felt the betrayal settle into a shape he could finally understand. Mia had not only hidden another relationship, she had used money he earned to maintain it. Sarah organized the records into separate folders. Affair evidence, financial misconduct, business debt, asset tracing. Each label made the situation feel less emotional, more permanent. Before David left, Sarah stopped him. "There is one thing you need to understand." He waited. "Knowing the truth does not require immediate action." David nodded. "Patience is still your strongest position." "I know." "Do you—" He looked at the envelope. "Yes." That evening, Mia arrived home carrying a shopping bag from a luxury boutique. David noticed the brand immediately. He also recognized the date. It matched one of the recent transfers Michael had flagged. Mia placed the bag on the kitchen counter. "Long day?" David asked. "Very." "How was the boutique?" "Slow." She opened the refrigerator. "We may need to talk again about inventory money." David watched her take out a bottle of sparkling water. "How much?" "Maybe 5,000. "What happened to the 3,500? "I handled it." "How?" She paused. "Rachel helped." David knew that answer could be checked. He did not challenge it. "That was generous of her." Mia closed the refrigerator. "She believes in me." David held her gaze. "I hope you're honest with her." Her expression changed slightly. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." She studied him. For a second, David wondered whether she could sense the difference in him. He was not colder. He was simply no longer confused. That distinction gave him a calmness she could not easily read. Mia carried the shopping bag upstairs. David remained in the kitchen. 10 minutes later, he opened his spreadsheet. Day 8. Private investigator confirms repeated meetings with Ethan Collins. Financial records align with restaurants, hotels, and luxury purchases. Joint marital funds likely used. No confrontation, no disclosure. He added one final column: purpose. Next to each unexplained transaction, he entered what the evidence now showed: dinner, hotel, gift, travel, vehicle service, jewelry. The numbers no longer floated without meaning. They formed a complete story. The following day, Daniel called again. "I learned something about Collins." David closed his office door. "What?" "He appears to believe Mia is independently wealthy." David frowned. "Why?" "She has presented herself as the primary owner of multiple properties and businesses. She owns one boutique." "That's not what she told him." David looked through the glass wall of his office at employees moving between desks. For years, Mia had presented herself online as successful. He assumed it was branding. Now he saw something else. The image was not meant only for customers. It was meant for Ethan. Daniel continued. "She also told him the house is hers." David's hand tightened around the phone. The house had been purchased with his down payment, his credit, his salary, his signature. Yet even that had become part of a story in which he barely existed. "Anything else?" David asked. "Yes." Daniel paused. "Collins has started asking questions about an investment Mia promised him." "What investment?" "I don't know yet." David stared at the spreadsheet on his computer. The affair was no longer only about secrecy. Mia had built it on a financial identity she did not possess. And somewhere inside that lie, she had made a promise large enough to create a new problem. Maya changed the story before anyone could ask for the truth. It began with a private message to Rachel, then a phone call, then a carefully worded conversation over lunch with two boutique owners Mia knew from South End. She never said David had abandoned her, not directly. She used softer words. "He has become very controlling. He moved money without warning. He is trying to make me financially dependent." Each sentence contained just enough truth to sound convincing. David had moved his paycheck. He had stopped paying Mia's personal expenses. He had refused to rescue the boutique. What Mia left out was everything that explained why. By the end of the week, several people believed David was punishing his wife because her business had become successful. The irony would have been almost amusing if it had not been so deliberate. David learned about the rumors from Kevin. They were sitting inside a small diner near Park Road when Kevin placed his phone on the table. "You need to see this." David looked at the screen. A mutual acquaintance had posted a vague message online. "Some men support ambitious women only until those women stop needing permission." No names appeared. None were necessary. Several comments mentioned Mia. One mentioned David. He read everything without changing expression. Kevin watched him. You're not going to respond? No. People think you're financially abusing her. I know. That doesn't bother you. David set the phone down. It bothers me. Then say something. David looked through the diner window at traffic moving beneath a gray Charlotte sky. What would I say? The truth. Which part? Kevin leaned back. David continued. That the boutique has lost money for 3 years, that she has hidden accounts, that she used joint funds for hotels and gifts. Kevin's anger faded. You have proof. I do. Then show them. David shook his head. Evidence belongs with my attorney, not social media. Kevin studied his brother for several seconds. You always were stubborn. Careful. Same thing sometimes. David almost smiled. He understood Kevin's frustration. Public silence looked like weakness. That was why Mia's version spread so easily. She spoke first. She spoke confidently. She spoke to people who had only seen the polished surface of their marriage. David had documents. Mia had a story. For the moment, the story moved faster. Rachel believed most of it at first. She had known Mia since college. She had watched her build Magnolia Avenue Boutique from an empty storefront. She remembered David carrying boxes and painting walls, but she also remembered how rarely he spoke during social gatherings. His quietness had always been easy to interpret. Patient, passive, distant. Now Mia offered a different explanation. He has always needed control, she said during lunch at a cafe near Dilworth. Rachel stirred her coffee. He never seemed controlling. That was because I never challenged him. What changed? The boutique started becoming mine. Rachel looked at her carefully. Wasn't it always yours? Mia paused. I mean, financially. Rachel remembered the empty racks, the missed deliveries, the unpaid internet service. She said nothing. Mia continued. He wants me to fail, so I have to depend on him. Did he say that? He didn't have to. The answer stayed with Rachel. Not because it sounded persuasive, because it didn't answer the question. Across town, Brandon Miller noticed another inconsistency. Mia told him David had frozen the boutique's operating funds. But Brandon knew business accounts did not work that way. Magnolia Avenue Boutique was registered under Mia's ownership. David had no authority to freeze its account. That afternoon, Brandon asked a simple question. Which account did he freeze? Mia stood behind the sales counter sorting invoices. The main one. Your business checking account? She looked up. The household account that supports the business. Brandon nodded slowly. So he stopped transferring personal money into the boutique. Mia's jaw tightened. He cut me off. That's not the same thing. Her expression changed. Whose side are you on? Brandon placed both hands on the counter. I'm not on anyone's side. Then stop questioning me. He stepped back. Fine. But the conversation confirmed what he had already suspected. The boutique wasn't suffering because David had taken business money. It was suffering because David had stopped replacing money the business had already lost. That difference mattered. David continued documenting everything. Day 11. Public claims of financial control reported by Kevin Garcia. No response issued. No records shared publicly. Legal counsel notified. Sarah Whitmore approved of his restraint. During their next meeting, she placed David's updated spreadsheet beside a growing stack of evidence. Do not defend yourself online. I wasn't planning to. Do not contact her friends. I won't. Do not threaten to expose her. David looked at the folders. The truth doesn't need a threat. Sarah nodded. Good. She opened a legal pad. Public accusations often become useful when compared against records. How? If she claims you removed business funds, we produce account ownership documents. David listened. If she claims you left household bills unpaid, we produce payment confirmations. Sarah turned another page. If she claims financial abuse, we produce years of transfers showing that you financed her business, personal spending, and lifestyle. So I wait. You prepare. The distinction mattered. Waiting suggested helplessness. Preparing required discipline. That evening, Mia confronted him in the kitchen. Rachel says you've been talking about our finances. David looked up from cutting vegetables. I haven't. Then how does Kevin know things? Kevin knows I'm reviewing my accounts. You told him I was in debt. No. You told someone. David placed the knife on the cutting board. I haven't discussed your debts publicly. She crossed her arms. People are judging me. He held her gaze. People are hearing what you tell them. Mia's face hardened. So this is all my fault. I didn't say that. You never say anything. David picked up the knife again. That doesn't mean I don't notice. For several seconds she remained completely still. Then she turned and walked away. The next shift came from Rachel. 2 days later she visited Magnolia Avenue Boutique without calling first. Mia was in the back office. An employee stood near the register explaining to a customer that a prepaid order had not arrived. Rachel waited until the customer left. What happened? The employee looked uncomfortable. You should ask Mia. Was the order paid for? I don't know. Rachel noticed a stack of envelopes beneath the counter. Final notice, past due, service suspension. She did not open them. She didn't need to. When Mia emerged, Rachel held up the coffee she had brought. Thought you might need this. Mia smiled too brightly. You're an angel. They stepped into the back office. Rachel closed the door. Did David freeze your business account? Mia set the coffee down. Basically. Basically isn't an answer. What is this? A question. Mia looked toward the door. Rachel continued. Brandon says the business account is yours. He doesn't understand our marriage. Did David take money from the boutique? Silence. Did he block access to your business funds? Another silence. Rachel's voice lowered. Or did he stop putting his own money into the business? Mia picked up the coffee. I don't have time for this. Rachel did not move. You borrowed $2,000 from me last month. I said I'd repay it. You told me a vendor payment was delayed because of a bank error. It was complicated. You also said David knew nothing about the boutique's problems. Mia stared at her. Rachel finally understood what had been bothering her. The stories changed depending on who was listening. David was controlling when Mia needed sympathy. David was uninvolved when Mia needed money. David was responsible when bills failed. David knew nothing when questions became specific. Rachel left without finishing her coffee. At 6:40 that evening, David received a text from an unfamiliar number. This is Rachel Morgan. I think we need to talk. David read it twice. He did not answer immediately. He forwarded the message to Sarah. Her response came 3 minutes later. Meet only in public, document the conversation, ask questions, make no accusations. David looked toward the staircase. Mia was upstairs getting ready for another networking dinner. He returned to the message and typed one sentence. Tomorrow, 5:30 p.m., Freedom Park Cafe. Rachel replied almost instantly, I'll be there. David placed the phone face down. For the first time since the rumors began, someone from Mia's circle was not asking him to defend himself. She was asking for the truth. Part 11. Mia was served outside Magnolia Avenue Boutique at 10:26 on a Tuesday morning. The process server approached while she stood near the entrance speaking with Brandon Miller. He asked her name, confirmed her identity, and handed her a sealed packet. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. Brandon watched Mia read the first page. Her face changed. Not dramatically. The smile disappeared first. Then the color beneath her makeup faded. She folded the papers against her chest and walked inside without speaking. By 10:41, David had received confirmation from Sarah Whitmore. Service completed. No complications. He read the message while sitting at his desk at Carolina First Financial Group. His hands remained still on the keyboard. For weeks he had prepared for this moment. He expected relief. Instead, he felt the final weight of something becoming official. The marriage had not ended yet, but it could no longer pretend to be healthy. At 10:47, Mia called. David allowed the phone to ring until it stopped. A second call came immediately. Then a third. He forwarded the information to Sarah and continued reviewing a compliance report. At 11:03, a text appeared. "What did you do?" David did not answer. Another message arrived. "You filed for divorce without even talking to me." Then another. "Call me now." David placed the phone face down. Sarah had warned him that the first hours after service would reveal more than any planned conversation. Mia called 12 times before noon. At 12:14, she left a voicemail. Her voice was low and controlled. "David, this has gone too far. Whatever point you were trying to make, you made it. We need to fix this before other people find out." He listened once, then saved the recording. The sentence stayed with him. "Not before we lose each other. Before other people find out." At Magnolia Avenue Boutique, the financial pressure continued without waiting for the legal case. A commercial internet technician arrived shortly after noon and disconnected the service for non-payment. The store's point-of-sale system stopped processing online transactions. One employee began writing receipts by hand. Another customer left when her card could not be processed. Brandon crossed the sidewalk after noticing the technician's truck. "Did they shut you off?" "It's temporary." For how long Mia gathered the divorce papers from the counter and pushed them into a drawer. "I said it's temporary." Brandon looked toward the empty racks. "You need to close for the day. I need customers. You can't process payments. I'll use my phone." He lowered his voice. "People are already noticing." Mia stared at him, then stopped standing in the window, making it worse. Brandon stepped back. He had offered help. She had heard judgment. At 2:30, Piedmont Business Credit sent a final demand notice. The boutique owed more than $8,000 across vendor balances, service charges, and late fees. A clothing supplier canceled the spring order completely. Another required full payment before releasing any remaining inventory. Without David's transfers, the business had not weakened gradually. It had stopped breathing. That afternoon, Ethan Collins called Mia twice. Daniel Foster documented the calls through legally obtained records later, but David did not know about them yet. What he did know came through Michael Reynolds. At 3:20, Michael contacted him. The hidden account balance changed. How much most of the remaining funds were transferred this morning? To where I can't confirm without formal discovery. Could she be moving assets? Possibly. David immediately called Sarah. She had already filed a request for temporary financial restrictions. No confrontation, she reminded him. "I understand. If funds are being concealed, the records will show it. What if they disappear first?" Money rarely disappears. Sarah paused. "It moves." David looked at the city beyond his office window. That was the difference between panic and evidence. Panic chased, evidence traced. At 5:30, he returned home. Mia's Mercedes was already in the driveway. The front door stood unlocked. Inside, several drawers had been opened. Papers covered the dining table. A half-packed suitcase rested near the staircase. Mia stood in the living room holding the divorce petition. "You came home. I live here." "Do you?" David placed his keys on the table. "What is that supposed to mean? You've been acting like a stranger for weeks." He looked at the suitcase. "Are you leaving?" "I haven't decided." "That's your choice." Her grip tightened around the papers. "You planned this." "Yes?" The honesty unsettled her more than denial would have. For how long? Long enough to understand the situation. What situation? David remained quiet. Mia stepped closer. You stopped paying bills. You watched my business struggle. You hired people to investigate me. He said nothing. Her eyes narrowed. You did investigate me. David answered carefully. My attorney has everything relevant. Relevant to what? The divorce? She laughed once. It sounded dry. You think some spreadsheets make you powerful? No, then what? They make things clear. Mia threw the petition onto the table. You could have talked to me. I tried for years. When every time I asked about the boutique. That was business. Every time I asked about spending. You judged everything I bought. Every time I asked whether we were still partners. Her face became still. David had not raised his voice. That made the words harder to dismiss. Mia pointed toward the suitcase. So you want me gone? I want us to follow the legal process. That sounds like Sarah Whitmore. It sounds like good advice. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Mia's posture changed. The anger softened. Her voice lowered. David. He waited. We can fix this. He looked at her without responding. The boutique failed because I got overwhelmed, she continued. I made mistakes. I hid things because I was embarrassed. David listened. I should have told you about the debt. He remained silent. I should have appreciated what you paid. Still nothing. Mia stepped closer. We've been married for 12 years. 14. The correction landed quietly. She looked away. 14, she repeated. That has to mean something. It does. Then stop this. I can't. You mean you won't? David met her eyes. Yes. For the first time, the answer contained no room for negotiation. Mia picked up her phone. Is there someone else? David nearly laughed at the question, but nothing about the moment felt funny. No. Then why are you so calm? He considered the truth. Because I stopped waiting for explanations. Her expression tightened again. She grabbed the suitcase and carried it upstairs. David did not follow. 10 minutes later, the front door closed behind her. The Mercedes reversed from the driveway and disappeared down the street. He stood alone in the living room. The house felt larger without the tension inside it. Not peaceful. Empty. There was a difference. The following morning, Michael reported another development. Ethan Collins had begun distancing himself from the promised Lake Norman investment. The proposed venture depended on capital. Mia had claimed she controlled. No deposit had been made. No ownership documents existed. No property agreement had been signed. The image she had created was beginning to fail in front of the man it had been designed to impress. At the boutique, employees asked whether they would receive their next paychecks. Brandon stopped extending professional favors. Rachel refused another request for money. Creditors continued calling. By Friday afternoon, Mia had nowhere left to place the blame without repeating herself. At 6:12 that evening, David received one final message. No anger, no accusation, just 7 words. Please meet me once, just you and me. David forwarded it to Sarah. Her response arrived immediately. Public place, daytime. No documents exchanged without me. David stared at Mia's message. For years, every difficult conversation had ended with him paying something. A bill, a debt, a price for peace. This meeting would be different. He typed a brief reply. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, Park Road Coffee. Mia answered within seconds. I'll be there. David placed the phone down. The 30-day experiment had exposed the money. The investigation had exposed the affair. Now one calm conversation would reveal whether Mia had finally come to tell the truth or simply to ask him to pay for one more lie. David arrived at Park Road Coffee 11 minutes early. He chose a table near the back wall, visible from the counter, and far enough from the entrance to avoid being overheard. Sarah Whitmore had approved the location. Public, quiet, neutral. David ordered black coffee. He placed his phone face up beside the cup and opened a small notebook. No photographs. No bank statements. No dramatic folder. He had brought only a written timeline Sarah had already reviewed. Mia entered at exactly 10. She wore a cream blouse, dark slacks, and the same composed expression she used when greeting customers at Magnolia Avenue Boutique. But the details betrayed her. No jewelry except her wedding ring, no designer handbag, no carefully styled social media smile. She carried a plain envelope beneath one arm. David stood as she approached. Mia sat without speaking. For several seconds, the sounds of the cafe filled the space between them. Milk steamed behind the counter. Cups touched saucers. A door opened, then closed. Mia placed the envelope on the table. I brought some documents. David did not reach for it. My attorney said we shouldn't exchange anything privately. Her mouth tightened. Sarah controls everything now. No. Then look at them. I will when she is present. Mia leaned back. You really don't trust me at all. David looked at her steadily. This meeting was your request. She lowered her voice. I wanted one conversation without lawyers. We can talk, but you won't listen. I'm listening now. Mia studied him, as though she were searching for the man who used to solve every problem before she finished explaining it. That man was still there. He had simply stopped volunteering. She folded her hands. I ended things with Ethan. David felt the sentence land inside him. There was pain, less than before. Okay. Her eyes narrowed. That's all you have to say. What response were you expecting? I don't know. Anger, questions, something? David lifted his coffee but did not drink. I already have answers. Mia looked toward the window. It wasn't what you think. He said nothing. It started as business. Silence. He had clients who wanted private shopping appointments. I thought he could help the boutique. David opened his notebook. February 8th. Mia looked back at him. What you told me you were attending a vendor dinner in Raleigh. Her face became still. David continued. The hotel record shows you were in Charlotte with Ethan. That doesn't prove March 17th. You said the Greenville trip was for a textile conference. She looked down. The hotel reservation was for 2 guests. The boutique calendar shows no conference. Mia's fingers tightened together. David turned one page. April 22nd. You told Rachel the boutique's card had been compromised. I was under pressure. The charge was for a jewelry store in South Park. Mia stared at him. He did not raise his voice. He did not show triumph. He simply continued. June 4th. $1,200 moved from our joint account into the hidden account. It wasn't hidden. I didn't know it existed. That doesn't make it illegal. No. David closed the notebook. It makes your explanation incomplete. Mia exhaled sharply. You planned this conversation. I reviewed the facts. You always hide behind facts. They don't change depending on who is listening. The words settled between them. Mia looked away first. I made mistakes. David waited. I should have told you about the debt. Yes, I should have told you about Ethan. Yes, I should not have used joint money. No. Her head turned back toward him. The single word sounded harder than a speech. Mia reached for the envelope. There are records in here showing some of those charges were business-related. Sarah can review them. You don't care what I say. I care whether it is true. Her voice sharpened. You think your records make you innocent. I haven't claimed to be perfect. You ignored me for years. David's jaw tightened slightly. You wanted quiet. You wanted routines. You wanted numbers. Every time I talked about growing the boutique, you asked about margins, because we were financing losses. You never believed in me. I spent $180,000 supporting that business. Mia stopped. The number visibly struck her. David continued. I painted the walls, installed the shelving, covered rent, paid suppliers, replaced payroll shortages. I know. His voice remained low. You knew money appeared. You never asked what it cost me. Mia looked at the table. For the first time, no immediate answer came. David watched her wedding ring catch the overhead light. 14 years compressed into that small piece of metal. A church outside Matthews. A rented apartment. Late dinners after double shifts. The first boutique key. The first transfer he called temporary. The last payment he chose not to make. Mia spoke quietly. Ethan left. David said nothing. When he found out about the divorce, he started asking questions. About the Lake Norman investment. Her eyes lifted. You know about that. I know you promised capital you did not control. It was an idea. He believed it was funded. I thought the boutique would recover. With what money? She looked away again. David understood then that the investment had been another future rescue. Mia had expected the boutique to improve, expected him to keep paying, expected the accounts to remain available, expected every promise to be covered by money she never personally earned. The 30-day experiment had interrupted all of it, not by creating a new problem, by removing the protection that kept old problems invisible. Mia leaned forward. I will close the boutique. David remained still. I'll sell the Mercedes. He listened. I'll repay Rachel. Silence. I'll go to counseling. David looked directly at her. Why now? The question was quiet. Mia blinked. What why now? Because I don't want to lose our marriage. You were willing to risk it while you believed I would keep paying. That isn't fair. It is the question. She opened her mouth. No answer came. David did not need access to her thoughts. Her silence was enough. She reached across the table. Her hand stopped before touching his. Please. David looked at it. For years, that word would have moved him. Please cover the rent. Please transfer the money. Please handle the card. Please fix the problem. He had mistaken being needed for being loved. Now he understood the difference. I'm not withdrawing the petition. Mia's hand slowly returned to her side. You've already decided. Yes. So there was no reason to meet. There was. What you asked for one honest conversation. Her expression tightened. And was it? David looked at the unopened envelope. Not completely. Mia stood. The chair scraped lightly against the floor. You're going to regret this. David remained seated. Maybe. You think life will be peaceful without me, I don't know. You think those people around you care more than I do. I'm not leaving for someone else. Then what are you leaving for? David considered the question. For a life where the truth doesn't have to be investigated. Mia stared at him. Then she picked up the envelope and walked toward the exit. Before she reached the door, it opened. Sarah Whitmore entered carrying a slim legal folder. Mia stopped. Her face changed. You brought her? David stood. She wasn't part of the conversation. Sarah approached calmly. I'm here because your attorney agreed to receive updated financial restrictions today. Mia looked from Sarah to David. What restrictions? Sarah opened the folder. A court order prohibiting either party from transferring, concealing, selling, or borrowing against marital assets without disclosure. Mia's fingers tightened around the envelope. Sarah continued. It also requires preservation of banking records, electronic messages, business files, and account information. The cafe suddenly seemed too quiet. Mia looked at David. You're trying to destroy me. David's voice did not change. No. Sarah held out the papers. We're making sure nothing else disappears. Mia accepted them. Her eyes moved across the first page. David watched the last certainty leave her face. The explanations were no longer competing with his suspicions. They were competing with authenticated records. Mia turned and walked out. David remained beside the table until the door closed. Sarah placed the legal folder beneath her arm. How did it go? David looked at the two untouched coffees. She apologized for the consequences, not the choices. Not clearly. Sarah nodded. Are you ready to continue? David picked up his notebook. Yes. They left the cafe together. Outside, Mia's Mercedes was already gone. On the table behind them, nothing remained except 2 coffee cups and a faint circular stain where the unopened envelope had rested. For the first time in 14 years, David walked away without paying the price required to keep the lie alive. Part 14. The account belonged to a company David had never heard of. Hawthorne Lifestyle Consulting, LLC. Michael Reynolds placed the registration documents on Sarah Whitmore's conference table the following morning. The company had been formed 4 years earlier using a virtual office address in Raleigh. Mia was listed as the sole managing member. David read the name twice. What does it do? Michael turned to the next page. According to the registration image consulting event, planning and retail strategy. Did it report income? Almost none. Then why did she fund it? Michael opened a transaction summary. Money had entered the account in small amounts, $500, $800, sometimes $2,000. Most transfers originated from the same hidden account Mia had used for private expenses. Over 4 years, Hawthorne Lifestyle Consulting had received more than $54,000. David studied the timeline. The transfers began before the affair with Ethan Collins, before the hotel stays, before the boutique's worst losses. This secret was older. Sarah reviewed the records carefully. What were the funds used for? Mostly personal branding expenses. Michael said, professional photography, social media management event, tickets, luxury clothing rentals, and private membership fees. David looked up. Memberships. Michael slid another page toward him. One charge appeared every quarter. The Queen City Executive Circle. David recognized the name. It was a private networking organization for business owners, real estate developers, and high-income professionals in Charlotte. Mia had attended their events for years. She always described them as boutique marketing opportunities. Michael pointed to several additional payments. She also used the company to make herself appear financially independent. How vendor invoices were issued under Hawthorne's name. Some luxury purchases were recorded as consulting expenses. The account paid for promotional materials describing her as the founder of 2 successful companies. David sat back. Magnolia Avenue Boutique had been losing money. Hawthorne Lifestyle Consulting barely operated, yet together they created the appearance of expansion, a public image built from private transfers. Sarah closed the folder. This strengthens the marital waste argument. David felt no victory, only exhaustion. Every time he believed the full truth had emerged, another layer appeared beneath it. The marriage had not contained one lie. It had contained a system of them. Weeks later, the final financial hearing returned them to Judge Elaine Parker's courtroom. Michael testified about Hawthorne Lifestyle Consulting. He showed the registration, the bank activity, the minimal revenue, the personal expenses categorized as business development. Mark Ellison attempted to describe the company as a legitimate startup. Judge Parker asked one question. What service did it provide? Mark turned toward Mia. After a brief consultation, he answered, brand development and consulting, for whom no client list was produced, no signed contracts existed, no meaningful invoices showed outside customers. Only expenses. Judge Parker reviewed the records for several minutes. Then she ruled that the account contained marital funds subject to distribution. She also found that a significant portion had been used for undisclosed personal purposes. The consequences followed quietly. The hidden money was added back into the marital estate. Several debts Mia created without David's knowledge were assigned to her. The boutique's unpaid operating obligations remained connected to the business. David was not ordered to continue financing it. The marital home would be sold unless one party refinanced within 90 days. David chose not to keep it. That surprised Kevin. "You paid most of it," he said when they met for coffee after the ruling. "I know." "Then why let it go?" David looked down at his cup. "Because owning it would mean paying to preserve a place I no longer want to return to." Kevin nodded slowly. That makes sense. David wasn't sure it did, but it felt true. The house contained good memories. It also contained years of small compromises he had mistaken for peace. Keeping it would not recover what happened there. It would only preserve the rooms. The sale closed 3 months later. David packed his belongings himself: clothes, books, kitchen tools, his old desktop computer, the worn leather briefcase. He left the large furniture for the sale staging company. On the final morning, he stood inside the empty living room. The wedding photograph was gone. The mantel was bare. Sunlight crossed the hardwood floor without touching anything personal. David placed the house key on the kitchen counter. Then he walked out. He purchased a modest 2-bedroom townhouse near Madison Park. It had an aging deck plain cabinets and a garage barely large enough for his Ford F-150. Kevin helped him move. Linda arrived with food and 3 boxes David had not requested. "What's in those?" he asked. "Things a home needs. I already have things." Linda opened the first box. Towels, coffee mugs, a small table lamp. "You have objects," she said. "These are things." David did not argue. During the following weekends, he repaired the deck, repainted the kitchen, replaced loose cabinet handles, installed shelves in the 2nd bedroom. The work felt different from the weekends he spent building Magnolia Avenue Boutique. There was no promise that someone else would appreciate it, no expectation of praise. He fixed things because he wanted them fixed. Each completed task stayed completed. At Carolina First Financial Group, David's performance had not gone unnoticed. His supervisor called him into the office one Tuesday afternoon. "I know the last several months have been difficult." David waited. "You never allowed it to affect your work." "I tried not to." "You did more than try." A promotion letter rested on the desk. Senior Director of Financial Compliance. The salary increase was substantial. So was the responsibility. David read the offer carefully. "You don't have to answer today," his supervisor said. David looked at the title again. For years, he had kept his ambitions small because every increase in income became another cushion beneath someone else's spending. Now the decision belonged only to him. "I accept." His supervisor smiled. "I thought you would." David celebrated by buying nothing expensive. He called Linda, then Kevin. That evening he cooked steak on the small townhouse patio and ate outside while the sun disappeared behind neighboring roofs. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. Rachel repaid part of the money Mia had borrowed from her by selling several items Mia had given her as supposed promotional gifts. David learned this only because Rachel sent him a brief message. "I should have questioned things sooner." He replied with one sentence: "You questioned them when it mattered." Brandon Miller eventually purchased the remaining Magnolia Avenue boutique inventory through a liquidation sale. He did not reopen the business. He cleared the storefront and helped 2 former employees find work at neighboring stores. The Magnolia Avenue sign came down on a rainy Thursday morning. David did not attend. He saw a photograph online days later. For a moment he remembered installing the first lights beneath that sign. Then he closed the page. Ethan Collins disappeared from Mia's public life. The proposed Lake Norman investment never existed beyond conversations and promises. When Ethan learned the property equity required David's consent, and that Mia's businesses had little actual value, he withdrew from every arrangement connected to her. David felt no satisfaction in that either. The affair had not been a great romance destroyed by legal pressure. It had been another transaction built on false appearances. 6 months after the final ruling, David began volunteering twice a month at a community financial literacy workshop hosted by a Charlotte nonprofit. He taught people how to read credit reports, build emergency funds, separate personal and business expenses, recognize financial patterns before they became crises. He never mentioned Mia. He never used his marriage as an example. But when someone asked why records mattered so much, David always gave the same answer. Because memory changes under pressure. Numbers don't. One Saturday after a workshop, he returned to the townhouse and noticed something unusual. Nothing needed his immediate attention. No overdue notice, no emergency transfer, no unexplained charge, no request waiting behind a polite smile. He placed his keys on the counter and stood in the silence. Peace had once seemed passive to him, something created by avoiding conflict. Now he understood it differently. Peace required boundaries, sometimes paperwork, sometimes loss, sometimes the courage to let a familiar life end. His phone vibrated. A message from Sarah. Final decree entered. The divorce is complete. David read the sentence once. Then he walked onto the repaired deck. The evening air was warm. Traffic moved faintly beyond the trees. He expected the moment to feel dramatic. It did not. There was no celebration, no revenge. Only one long breath he felt he had been holding for years. Then another message appeared. This one came from Mia. I hope the 30 days were worth it. David stared at the words. He did not answer. Not yet. Because the experiment had never been about whether 30 days were worth losing a marriage. It had been about discovering whether there was still a marriage left to save. And now, with the legal case finished and the noise finally fading, David was ready to face the full cost of that answer. David did not answer Mia's message that evening. He left the phone on the kitchen counter and stepped onto the deck. The last light of day rested between the trees behind his townhouse. Somewhere beyond the fence, a lawnmower stopped. A dog barked twice. Then the neighborhood became quiet again. I hope the 30 days were worth it. The words remained on the screen. David understood the question beneath them. Was discovering the truth worth losing the house? The boutique, 14 years of marriage, the version of his future he had protected for so long, he still had no simple answer. Truth rarely returned what it removed. It only showed what had already been gone. The following morning marked exactly 1 year since the first failed payment notification appeared on David's computer. He noticed the date while reviewing his calendar at work, April 1st. For several seconds, he remembered sitting alone in the home office with the household spreadsheet open before him. Back then, he believed he was investigating an unfair financial arrangement. He had not expected hidden accounts, hotels, an affair, a second company, or a marriage supported almost entirely by one man's refusal to ask difficult questions. At noon, Kevin called. "Dinner tonight, I'm working late. You always say that." David smiled. "I'll be there at 7. They met at Linda's house in Matthews. She had prepared enough food for twice the number of people attending. Kevin brought his wife and young daughter. The kitchen filled with ordinary noise. Silverware, conversation, a child laughing because she had hidden peas beneath a dinner roll. David sat at the table and realized he was no longer listening for his phone. No payment alerts, no requests, no emergency waiting to become his responsibility. Linda placed another serving of potatoes on his plate. "You look rested." "I am." Kevin looked across the table. "That promotion finally turning you into management?" "Apparently." Linda smiled. "He was management at 12. David shook his head. "I was not. You made chore schedules. Because nobody followed them." Kevin laughed. For a moment, David felt something he had forgotten. Belonging without being useful. Nobody at the table needed him to pay for dinner. Nobody measured his value by the problem he could solve. They simply wanted him there. Afterward, Linda walked him to the front porch. Did you ever answer her? David knew who she meant. No. Will you? I don't know. Linda folded her arms against the evening air. You don't owe anyone a response. I know. But sometimes you owe yourself an ending. David looked toward his truck. What would I say the truth? He laughed softly. That answer seems popular lately, because you spent too long avoiding it. The drive home took 25 minutes. David kept the radio off. When he reached the townhouse, he opened Mia's message again. Then he typed. The 30 days did not end our marriage. They showed me what was holding it together. He read the sentence twice. It contained no insult, no accusation, no invitation to argue. He pressed send. Mia did not reply. That was the last personal message exchanged between them. By summer, the final consequences of the case had settled into ordinary life. Rachel Morgan received the remaining money Mia owed her through the liquidation of personal property. She and Mia no longer spoke regularly. Rachel never publicly criticized her former friend. She simply stopped defending stories she could no longer believe. Brandon Miller expanded his men's clothing store into the vacant Magnolia Avenue space. He kept 2 former boutique employees and removed the dividing wall between the storefronts. The new business looked nothing like Mia's boutique. David preferred that. Ethan Collins continued selling luxury real estate in Charlotte, but his connection to Mia disappeared from public events and social media. Daniel later confirmed that Ethan had withdrawn from every proposed business arrangement after learning there was no Lake Norman investment capital. The relationship had depended on an image. Once the image lost its money, it lost its power. Mia moved into a smaller apartment outside Charlotte. The Mercedes was sold. Magnolia Avenue Boutique remained closed. Hawthorne Lifestyle Consulting was dissolved after its remaining assets were disclosed and divided. David heard these facts through Sarah and the final legal records. He did not ask for more. Consequences did not need an audience to be real. He never discovered whether Mia regretted losing him, losing the lifestyle, or losing control of the story. That question no longer belonged to his future. What mattered was what David finally understood about himself. He had not been weak. He had been patient without limits. There was a difference. Weakness would have meant seeing the truth and refusing to act. David had simply taken too long to accept that love could not survive on one person's endurance. His silence had protected Mia. His money had protected the boutique. His routines had protected the marriage's public image. But none of those things had protected him. In September, David attended a financial literacy workshop at a community center near West Boulevard. 23 people sat in folding chairs while he explained household budgeting. Near the end, a middle-aged man raised his hand. What if your spouse refuses to talk about money? David placed the marker down. Then the refusal is part of the financial information. The man frowned. What does that mean? It means a budget is not only numbers, it is behavior. David looked across the room. Who avoids the statements? Who makes decisions alone? Who expects rescue? Who becomes angry when questions are asked? Nobody spoke. David continued. Money problems can be repaired when both people are honest. Secrecy is harder. After the workshop, the man thanked him privately. David did not share his own story. He did not need to. The lesson had already become useful without the details. Months passed. David replaced the Ford F-150 after its transmission finally failed. He chose a modest silver pickup. Nothing luxurious. For the first time, however, he did not feel guilty about buying something for himself. He paid a reasonable down payment, reviewed the interest rate, signed the documents, then drove away without wondering which household emergency would punish him for the decision. The freedom felt small. That made it real. On the first Sunday of the following spring, David returned to Freedom Park. He arrived before sunrise wearing running shoes and a navy jacket. Mist hovered above the lake. A few early walkers moved along the path. David followed the trail slowly. He passed the parking area where he had once sat with Daniel's envelope resting on the passenger seat. He remembered the weight of those photographs, the fear before opening them, the cold certainty afterward. At the time, he believed that moment had destroyed his life. Now he saw it differently. The envelope had not taken his life apart. It had shown him which pieces had never truly belonged together. As the sun rose above the trees, light spread across the water. David stopped near a bench. His phone remained silent in his pocket. No one needed money. No one needed an explanation. No one was waiting for him to rescue a lie. He took a long breath. Then he smiled. Not because Mia had suffered, not because he had won, not because the court had confirmed what he already knew. He smiled because revenge was no longer necessary. Peace had become enough. 30 days without David's money had exposed the marriage. But the year that followed exposed something else. His value had never been measured by how much he could carry. It lived in his discipline, his integrity, his patience, and finally in his willingness to stop paying for a life that required him to disappear. David continued along the path as the park awakened around him. He did not look back. For the first time in years, the road ahead belonged entirely to him. David's story was never really about money. It was about what happened when one man stopped confusing sacrifice with love. For years, he believed patience meant remaining silent, loyalty meant paying every bill, and peace meant preventing conflict at any cost. But real peace cannot exist where honesty is missing. The 30 days did not destroy his marriage. They simply removed the financial protection that had kept the truth hidden. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is not react immediately. David did not shout, threaten, or seek revenge. He observed, he documented, he prepared. And when the truth finally entered a courtroom, it did not need anger to make itself heard. Records spoke louder than accusations. Consistent actions spoke louder than appearances. Many people stay in painful situations because they are afraid that setting boundaries will make them selfish. But a boundary is not punishment. It is a clear line showing where love ends and exploitation begins. Walking away from dishonesty does not mean the years were meaningless. It means the future still matters. What would you have done in David's position? Would you have confronted Mia immediately, or would you have waited and gathered evidence? First, share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Your story may help someone else recognize a truth they have been avoiding. And subscribe to the channel because tomorrow's story is about another quiet person who was underestimated until one carefully prepared decision changed everything.